Hey guys, it's Ryan from stampcollectors.us. I often get asked, what do I collect? Especially since I'm a full-time stamp dealer. Most of us started out as collectors but eventually moved into the business side of things. Most dealers I know don't really collect stamps for fun, it's their job. And they'd rather sell the stamps than sit around looking at them. I do keep a collection, but it's more of an investment portfolio than a hobby collection. In this video, I'm breaking down the difference between collecting and investing in stamps. I'll share some tips on stamp investing and show you a few of my top investment pieces from my own collection. But before I do, please be sure to subscribe to my channel where I post videos on how to identify rare stamps, stamp collecting tips, and even some interesting history facts inspired by stamps. Alright, let's kick things off with the basics. Collecting is all about gathering items based on a theme or personal interest. You might focus on stamps in general or go for something more specific like stamps from a certain country or ones featuring birds or flowers. When you collect, you're in it for the joy of finding and completing a set, and sometimes the emotional or sentimental value of an item matters more to you than the price tag. Investing, on the other hand, is a totally different game. Investors aren't emotionally attached to the stamps they buy. Instead, they study the market and look at past sale prices and pay close attention to factors like supply and demand. While most stamp values do tend to go up over time, some stamps really outperform the rest and become highly sought after. Even a stamp that's pretty common can turn into an investment piece if it's in excellent condition. For example, a stamp like Scott number 629 might be common, but if it's perfectly centered and graded 98 or 100, it becomes a hot investment piece. I happen to have one that's graded 100J. The J meaning that it has jumbo margins, which means that the margins are much larger than normal. You can't get better than a 100J grade. And it makes this stamp, normally worth $1, now worth $900 because of how rare it is to find with such perfect centering and in sound condition. There's only one other known example in the entire world that shares this same grade. Before the 1940s, printing technology wasn't as advanced, so most stamps printed back then weren't well centered. Finding one that is like searching for a needle in a haystack. Rarity is a huge factor too. Imagine that there are 10 known examples of a super rare stamp, and 9 of them have some damage. That one flawless stamp is a real gem. To put it in perspective, if a damaged stamp sells for $100, a sound one could easily go for double that price, or even more. Of course, the final price depends on whether a buyer is willing to pay that much for it. It's also important to know the difference between the terms rare and scarce. Rare means that there aren't that many in existence, while scarce means that there aren't many available for sale. You might have a stamp that's common overall but hard to find on the market, which makes it scarce. Or a stamp that might be rare in general, but if a lot of them are available for sale, then it isn't scarce. In short, a good investment stamp needs to be either rare or scarce, and it has to be in top condition. Supply and demand play a big role too. Take Scott number 1 as an example. This stamp is rare, only a limited number were printed, and only a small percentage have survived. Damaged examples might be easy to find for under $200, but a well-centered, undamaged one could cost you $500 or more. Popularity is another factor. A rare and well-preserved stamp from a popular series is easier to sell and more likely to increase in value. On the flip side, a stamp might be rare but only appeal to a small group of collectors, which can lower its market value or make it tough to sell. When investing, it's smart to focus on popular issues that are both well-centered and in perfect condition. The best way to ensure that is by investing in stamps that are certified as sound or graded. I made another video on how to get stamps certified, and you can find the link in the description. For super rare stamps, or those from the 1800s, finding an example that checks all the boxes, popularity, rarity, and condition, can be really tough. In those cases, I'd rather go for a sound stamp, even if it's a little bit off center. When it comes to collectibles, condition usually matters more than perfect centering. Damage can be a real turnoff for buyers, so it's best to avoid it. I also use the PSE website to look up values for graded stamps. Since centering is easy to judge visually but condition isn't, using certified grades helps avoid surprises. I usually estimate the retail value for graded stamps at around 80% of the SMQ value on the PSE website. And the reason for this is to account for typical auction house commissions, which are usually around 20%. For example, if a stamp has an SMQ value of $100 and it goes up for auction, A buyer who's willing to pay that $100 is actually going to bid $80, knowing they're going to have to pay a 20% buyer's fee on top of that, bringing it closer to $100. So the owner of the stamp selling it should expect to get 20% less than the SMQ value. The number one rule in my stamp investment portfolio is that the stamps must be completely free of damage. For ultra rare stamps, like this Mint Scott number 10A, I'm more relaxed about centering as long as the stamp is sound. For stamps issued after 1900, I look for both good centering and sound condition, since modern stamps are generally better printed and are more common to find with very fine centering. Alright, here are some of my favorite investment pieces in my collection. Here's a Scott 131. This is the reissue of the 1869 30-cent pictorial stamp, issued without a grill. Most of the reissues I've seen have almost proof-like impressions and colors. This one is unused without gum, and it's graded 85, which is very fine to extremely fine, giving it an SMQ value of $1,500. A funny story with this one, I first sent it in for grading, and it was graded an 80. And after looking at several examples of graded 95s, I knew this one was almost exactly centered like those, and definitely much better centered than a 90. I sent it back for a reconsideration, and they upgraded it to an 85. I personally think it's at least graded a 90, but they probably want to avoid moving it up too far in grade because it's a reflection of their previous certification. I might send this one into PF for another opinion. In either case, this is a sound, well-centered example of the 30-cent pictorial reissue. It makes a great investment piece because of the popularity of the pictorial set, along with its rarity, centering, and soundness. Here's another popular variety of the 1890 small banknote issues. This is Scott number 220C, which is the version with caps on both twos. Most advanced stamp albums have spaces for the cap varieties of Scott 220, so many collectors are on the lookout for them, making them a popular issue. This one has original gum and is sound. The catalog value for this stamp is $650. I would say that this one has fine centering, so I don't think it's good enough to get graded, but being that it's sound and mint makes it an investment piece since a used version is only valued at $30. The large difference in the value for mint is a reflection of its rarity and popularity. Next, we have one of the most popular stamps in the United States. The $5 Columbian issue is one that most collectors dream about one day owning. It's the crown jewel of the 1893 Columbian set. Most collectors are able to get fair examples of the denominations up to the 50-cent issue, but when you get into the dollar and up issues, they can become quite expensive. Getting an example of this stamp with poor centering and some faults is still going to run you several $100s. This one is extremely fine and graded 90. This brings its value up from $2,400 in sound mint condition with very fine centering to $4,500 at a grade 90. It's also very lightly hinged, which again adds more value and makes it a more desirable piece and solid investment. Here's a Scott number 292, also known as the Kettle in the Storm issue of the Trans-Mississippi set of 1898. This may be one of the most popular 19th century stamps ever. It's often been described as the most beautiful stamp ever produced by the United States Post Office. While not spectacular in color, the engraving work on it and dramatic scene has made it stand out over time. Getting one of these with poor centering and some faults is going to run you a couple $100. This one is mint and lightly hinged. It has spectacular centering, especially for this issue, which is known for having small margins, with most stamps being poorly centered. At a grade of 90, this stamp is now worth $1,800, and because of its centering and sound condition, along with its immense popularity, it makes this stamp a solid investment piece. Next up is one of my favorites. This is an inverted error stamp known as Scott 294. The black ship is upside down. This stamp is sound, and I'd call it almost very fine centering, and it has a value of a crazy $12,500. Popular errors like this one make solid investment pieces, as they're not only rare, but pique the interest and curiosity of many collectors, past and present. Next, I have a Scott 583. This is an example of a basically worthless stamp. It has a catalog value of only $6 with very fine centering. But this one has perfect centering, the highest grade you can get. In fact, having an example of this common stamp with perfect centering is so rare, it goes from being worth $6 to being worth $1,250. In fact, it's the only known example to get this high of a grade at PSE, making it a good investment piece, having the best example known. Here's another example of a common stamp that's generally worth a few dollars, but now that it's graded a perfect 100 gem, it's now worth $625. Like the last one, This one is the best known recorded example in the PSE database. I love hunting for gems like this. This Scott 619 was in an otherwise fairly common collection. The collector was a hobby collector, and they likely didn't notice how perfectly centered this stamp was. You don't come across diamonds in the rough like this very often, but when you do, it's such an exciting find. It's totally fine to be both a collector and investor. I only hold on to the stamps that make sense as investments because I need to sell everything else to keep my stamp business going. If you're more focused on a return on your money than sentimental value, stamp investing might be the right way to go. I hope that you found this video useful or entertaining. If you did, please be sure to give it a like, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, best of luck and happy collecting.